Hello and welcome to my piano tutorial for the La La Land Epilogue piano medley. This was a really cool piece in the movie, not only because of the emotional significance, but also because it gave an easy opportunity to create a piano medley that included all of the musical themes of the film. As per usual with my tutorials, first I'll be playing the entire piece through a little bit slower than in the original video, so that you can see overhead what my hands are doing, what fingerings I'm using. And then afterwards, I'll be going through the piece and pointing out a bunch of different things that might be able to help you while you're learning the piece. Maybe going over some tricky parts or explaining something to watch out for. So anyways, the timestamps for that will be in the description below. And if there are any further questions you have after the video, feel free to leave them in the comments. Also, one more quick thing I want to point out. The sheet music you'll be seeing on screen is a bit different from the sheet music that you saw in the original video. Almost all of that is just formatting changes that I was suggested by people who know how to do sheet music better than I am. So the changes are made for the ease of reading and learning. And then there's also a handful of moments where I changed a note because I realized I transcribed it wrong from the original piece. So I just thought, hey, I'd take the opportunity to change that. Anyways, without further ado, let's get on with the tutorial. All right, so now going through the piece, the first thing I would say right off the bat is to listen to the original soundtrack, the original track Epilogue, for the emotional cues for when you're performing this piece. If the reason that you've come across this piece is not because of the original movie, probably watch the original movie too, because it's going to give you that emotional weight in your mind behind what you're playing. And that's something that I find just adds just a little bit more oomph in my mind when I'm like coming up with the interpretation. The beginning is pretty straightforward, and then right as you get up to the end, you get that first run where it's like the first impressive moment of the piece. So it looks really complicated, but it's actually the same sort of pattern over and over again. So you've got, it's basically these notes, and you're just doing runs up and down with your hands as you go. The main tricky part is just mastering that 4-to-1 or that 5-to-1 flip that you're going to be doing with your right hand. Going up further to measure 36, the cool part I find about this is that the right hand kind of takes one of the notes from the left hand's arpeggio, so it gives you that break to sort of reposition your left hand to be ready for the drop. So you're going up, down, and then it takes up that note so you can position instead of being in the, you can be. So you're just ready to go down with that left hand. And then up a little bit further, you got some like tied notes here, a tie note action. That's to emphasize, I think there's like a series of horns or something in the original soundtrack where the notes are sort of still building off of each other. So you want to try and hold those notes down. And the reason you want to hold these notes down is because you're not going to be wanting to use the pedal in this section because it's supposed to be very bouncy and just to really get the syncopation from the left hand. So the right hand you're adding a pedal effect to the right hand while you're still doing staccato with the left hand. Up here around measure 53, this was one of the very hardest parts for me to learn of the entire piece. I guess it's just because of like the syncopated rhythms, or the rhythms don't quite match up. Something about it just tripped me up every time, but I just had to just practice the left hand and the right hand over and over and over again, and really just sort of have it hammered in your mind that these are both going on independently of each other. And in fact, you can kind of tie it mentally. You can tie them mentally to each other in like the difficult part. So you can just sort of picture that chord in your mind, so your mind doesn't try to do something like, you can just try to picture that chord in your mind so your mind doesn't get mentally tripped up. Up here in the section around measure 63, you've got the sort of like the, this sort of section. Now in the original soundtrack, it's played very rhythmically. It's in the middle of where the two main characters are going through this magical set. And so they're doing everything in the rhythm of a stepwise, dance beat. However, a thing in Kyle Landry when he covered this arrangement that I really liked is he slowed down a ton right at this moment. So he's going to, he sort of kept speeding it up, and then you sort of get to the big crescendo where it's like, and so I really like that interpretation, even if it isn't what's exactly in the original track. Also, a quick note, at measure 61, that note right there, that is changed from the original video, and that's because that is the actual note. So it's not a typo. That was a conscious change. So let's see. Again, a thing around A measure 82, that sort of section of two measures in the middle there where you're just going to... There's not really like a full-on beat there. It's just sort of like it flows. So, use your playing discretion. Don't try and rhythmically follow those two measures exactly. Listen to the original and listen to CPS or piano recording to get a sense of the motion of that section. Measure 108, this is the beginning of the jazz section. So in this section, the left hand's playing just octave notes of the bass line. And so you're going to want to try using the pedal very selectively in this section to sort of bring out the twang, the funk of the bass. So you're going to be using it sparingly, but you are still going to be using it. For the trumpet solo section, I did put in fingerings, although I don't know if these fingerings actually work best for everyone. So figure out which fingerings work best for you. You can write on your own, really. You can see what I did earlier in the tutorial. It's not exactly following what I wrote down. I just sort of wanted to put a guideline out there in case anybody was completely lost. And then we get to my favorite part, and of course I think most people's favorite part, the climax of the whole piece. This beautiful part. So anyways, as far as the fingering goes, the fingering is really important in this section. And it's something that I spent a ton of time practicing just so like I had it down in my head. Because especially when you get to the parts where it's like... it's really important to be able to nail that. And something that I actually find cool about this section is if you play it a little bit slower, you get the sort of the full harmonics of the left hand really brought out more, and it sounds a little bit more softer and like sweeter. I don't know. So if you're feeling a lot of pressure to play this section fast, because it's the most dazzling part of the piece perhaps, and you can't quite do it, don't worry. I think playing it a little bit slower can sound perhaps even better depending on how you play it if you really bring out the dynamics of the left hand leg. So don't be afraid to take that section slower. That's my main point. Next up we have the City of Stars section, measure 154. Originally I wrote this in I think 6/8 time in the original video. Again, I've changed that here to 4/4 and in swing notation I think that's more close to the actual intonation of the original song. And then at the very end you've got the quiet. Now that's the exact transcription from the original track. However, a suggestion by one of the commenters is that I could have moved it up an octave to be like. And I actually do really like that. So if you want to add maybe a little bit of an extra oomph to the ending, because it is a simple part, but of course each note is played with a lot of emotion because Sebastian's sort of pouring his heart out on the keys at that point in the film. You can try for the second group, perhaps starting at like measure 182, just moving that whole section up an octave. Anyways, that concludes my piano tutorial / learning guide. If you have any more questions, please leave them down in the comment section and I will be taking a look. I hope you enjoyed this piano tutorial and that you'll see me in the next one.